All right, welcome everybody. So today I wanted to put together a very quick tutorial slash explanation of thumbstick dead zones inside of Halo Infinite. Now, for me, one of the first things that I did when I installed and loaded up the game was I went into settings, controller settings, and started adjusting the various controller settings to fit my playstyle and my comfort. And most of these settings are pretty self-explanatory as far as aim is concerned. You've got your sensitivity, acceleration, sensitivity just saying that, okay, how sensitive is the aimer in the game going to be to my thumbstick movement, acceleration being, once I start, moving the thumbstick further to the edge, how much is that movement going to start ramping up. So this is not a video talking about sensitivity or acceleration. If there's a request for that, I can certainly put one of those together, but these are pretty simple settings that others have probably explained much better than I can. Now, where things get a little bit more obtuse is when we start talking about dead zones. And dead zones are exactly what they sound like. They're areas within the circular area of the thumbstick, as read by the game, that are ignored as far as aiming is concerned. It's literally a dead zone. And we have dead zone settings, the same settings for both of our thumbsticks, our move thumbstick, which is our left thumbstick, and our look thumbstick, which is our right thumbstick. And those three settings are our center dead zone, our axial dead zone, and then our max input threshold. And what I'm going to do is go through each one of these one by one, quickly show you a very crude visual drawing of, what this dead zone would look like as you adjust it, and then maybe explain why you'd want to set one of these, one way or the other. So the first that we're going to start with is our center dead zone. And you'll notice this is a value that can be from 0 to 15. I think these all go, 0 to 15. 0 being the least amount of center dead zone, 15 being the max. Now, if we pop into my very detailed drawing that I've done, we have kind of a visual representation of what this dead zone looks like. And for a center dead zone or a radial dead zone, that is an area starting from the center that grows as it increases in a circle. That is input area that is totally ignored by the game. It's the dead zone. For most controllers that come from the factory, they're not fully mechanically zeroed. So when you don't have your thumb on the thumbstick, there is input actually being registered. There's some coordinate that is close to 0, but it's not actually 0. And that's where you get something like drift. Because the game thinks, oh, there's some input being registered. I've got to, move my aimer this way or that way. And it might be super minimal, it might be pretty high, just depending on the controller that you're using. So we have what's known as the center dead zone to adjust to kind of compensate for that. So the image that you're looking at right now is an example of what I would say is a lower dead zone, probably 1 through 3, somewhere in that range, that has somewhere, some percentage of the inner circular area that's totally ignored by the game. So what that means is it's going to take a little bit extra effort for me to move my thumbstick to an area where there is no dead zone, and then input can start being registered. So move my thumbstick until I escape the dead zone, and then my aimer starts moving. And as I increase that value from 0 to 15, that dead zone just gets larger. And it doesn't get infinitely larger. There's a cap on it. And this is where you kind of have to just adjust based on what feels comfortable to you. and, what is mechanically right for your thumbstick. Um, but yeah, you will expand your uh, thumbstick center dead zone, and then this area gets larger. So it'll take even more effort for you to get past this area and minimum input to be registered. Now, why would you do this? One, there's the idea of combating drift. So if you don't want your thumbstick, your aimer, to move when your thumbstick isn't being touched, then you would, slowly increase this dead zone until that drift goes away. Another reason might be that you've constantly got your thumb on the thumbstick, and even though you don't think you're providing input, just the fact that your thumb's sitting on there, you might be moving the thumbstick more than you think, and that's causing you to have unintended aiming consequences inside the game. So again, this one really simple to explain and to visualize. And again, this is what most people think of when they think of dead zones. And from a game perspective, really what I can show is, and I do have an overlay of my controller input on the screen. It's not perfect, but I'll kind of talk you through what I'm doing. So right now I'm providing very little input to my right thumbstick, and you can see my aimer's moving accordingly because I've got a very low dead zone. Now if I crank that up, and we'll just go to the other extreme end, crank that up to 15. Now when I make those same little movements, you can see my aimer is barely moving at all. You can see I get a little bit of vertical movement, but it takes a lot more effort for me to get even just minimal movement on my aimer. So that's center dead zone. Pretty simple one to understand. Pretty intuitive. Now the second setting that I want to explain is one where I think there is quite a bit of confusion, and that's the axial dead zone. And the axial dead zone is a dead zone along the axes of your thumbstick. So looking at our image again, when I say axes, I mean literally the X and Y axis of the controller. It provides a dead zone along the axis, north, south, east, west, that will, and this is where it gets a little tricky, where it will ignore input of the opposing axis inside the dead zone. So I'll try and show this with my cursor. So right now I'm on the X axis. I'm moving my thumbstick, and I'll show you on the screen, left and right, move my thumbstick left and right. Now, when I do so, I'm traveling along this dead zone, but I'm still getting left and right movement because this isn't ignoring left and right movement. What it's ignoring is movement along the Y axis, the vertical axis. So as I go right, even if I drift my thumbstick a little north, a little south, that gets ignored. I'm only getting this cardinal directional movement. And again, this is something that changes as the value gets larger. So we'll say that this is an axial of 2, right? This smaller area. And this is an increased axial. Let's say this is like a 5 or a 6 or whatever. I mean, just imagine it's something larger. It's going to take more effort as I go left and right for me to register north and south movement, so up and down movement of the thumbstick as I travel along these axes. All right, so that does sound kind of complicated, and it definitely is, but it's actually pretty easy to demonstrate in game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the game. I'm going to turn my axial dead zone all the way down. So this is that cross is now very thin, very small. And what I like to do is find something that is, and what we're going to do is turn off the bots for this. So I just don't get interrupted. Find something that's horizontal. You know, I'll look at this ledge here. And what I'll do is I'll zoom in on it. And what I'm going to do is, as you know, pretend like I was playing, I'm going to go left and right. As you can see, my aimer is not moving cleanly. I have to really concentrate to move it left and right without drifting up and down, because that cross on the x-axis is really small. That dead zone is really small. Now, if I start increasing this dead zone on the axis, so this axial dead zone, bring it up to something like a 5. I'm going to go at the same speed, and as you can see, there's way less drift as I move. And if I went even higher, flying around here, to like a 15, super clean. That is just, there's no vertical movement on the reticle. And then up, down, right? Get a nice clean line. Now that sounds great. Why not crank that all the way to the top? That's kind of the $1 million question. Well, there is a reason why you wouldn't want to do that, because we don't just go left and right, up and down. We also move diagonally. So as that axial dead zone increases, and we can go back to the image for this one, it makes diagonal movements just feel a little weird, because now movement along the axes is, or along this diagonal plane, is going to be adjusted by that axial dead zone. And this especially comes into play when I combine a center dead zone and an axial dead zone. So now any movement in this area is ignored in this area, because there's an intersection of both the axial and center dead zone. So my just personal recommendation for axial is find something that's kind of in the middle. If you go all the way to 0, you're going to find that your cardinal movements are not going to be as clean as you want. And in Halo, which is, you know, for a lot of weapons dependent on hitting clean headshots and a lot of pre-aiming, you're pre-aiming at head level, and then you want to maintain head level as you go left and right. So you might want to increase your axial dead zone because of this. And that's actually the reason why I changed mine, because for weapons like the shock rifle, I don't have an enemy to shoot, but what people will do is they'll find an area, you know, that's approximately head level. An enemy will, you know, come running out of here, and I want to maybe snap to that enemy. And if I have a very light axial dead zone, I might snap and then come down and not hit him in the head. So there's a reason why you want some axial dead zone. And for movement too. If I'm pressing forward on the thumbstick, but I find myself, like in this case, in my mind, my thumb says, hey, I'm going straight, but what the game's actually registering is a little bit of left and right movement. So that's where you might want to set a bit of axial dead zone on your movement thumbstick as well. Just with the understanding that things might feel a little sluggish for you. Again, it's all personal preference. All right, now the last dead zone that I wanted to explain is our max input threshold. This one is really counterintuitive. This is technically a dead zone, but it's an inverse dead zone. And the explanation says, you know, how far is the thumbstick from the edge before the maximum input registers? Maximum input is tied directly to your acceleration. So this is really, how quickly am I going to ramp up to my my top speed for my aimer, given my sensitivity and acceleration? And, you know, a lower value means I'm going to hit max acceleration later, and a higher value means I'm going to hit it sooner. And again, we'll come back to the amazing drawing and we'll show what the look threshold looks like. And like I said, this is an inverse of what that center dead zone was. So instead of starting from the center and moving outward, we're starting from the edge and moving inward. So as I increase, that's not where I want it. Yep. So there, as I increase, we're actually moving outward in. So with a low threshold, what this is telling the game is that not until I get all the way to this, portion of the thumbstick, really close to the edge, do I want you to, start activating our acceleration. So it's going to be pretty late in the game for that to happen. And as I increase it, the opposite occurs. I'm going to very quickly get up to that max acceleration, or start kicking in acceleration and then, get up to max acceleration. So why would we adjust that? You'll notice that, there's really two schools of thought here. Some players like to keep this at something like a 1, and others like to keep it at something like a 15. There's usually not a lot of in between when it comes to the input threshold, just because you either want to have, maximum pinpoint accuracy within the majority of the thumbstick, or you want to really move quickly and not have a lot of variance in your aim. Again, this is personal preference. And this is for the look thumbstick. For the move thumbstick, it operates in the same way. One thing to note there is that a higher threshold would enable you to achieve your strafe speed, or your forward backward movement speed, much quicker, because you're hitting that maximum input, so maximum strafe speed, a lot sooner in the thumbstick. But if you want more fine control over your movement or your strafe, then you would keep this lower. And I'll try and demonstrate this in game. I don't know how well it's actually going to look on the screen, but we'll start with a 0 max input threshold, and you're probably going to need to watch my thumbstick at the bottom of the screen just to see what it's doing. So I'm just going to peg it all the way to the left, and you can see acceleration does kick in, moving to the left, and then acceleration kicks in, maybe quarter of a second, half a second later. Now, if I crank this up on my look thumbstick to 15, I'm hitting max. You know what? Let's do this. Let's actually bring our acceleration speed. So yeah, I'm hitting that max accel really quickly, pegging it, and then I'm almost instantly hitting max accel. Whereas again, if this was lowered, I'm pegging it, but I'm not actually, there we go. See, I'm hitting my max accel much later in the movement of the thumbstick. Again, this is really based on feel. It's hard for me to demonstrate it visually in game, but at least now you have a better understanding of what that setting actually changes. So that really covers most of it for our dead zones. Again, just kind of a recap. We have our center dead zone, which increases the area of which you have to move your thumbstick from center for input to be registered. We have our axial dead zone, which is a dead zone on the axis, which as it increases, prevents registered movement in the opposing axis. Again, so if I'm left, right, it's going to prevent movement up, down as this axial dead zone increases. And then we have max input threshold, which is an inverse dead zone, which describes the area of the thumbstick where we start kicking in our max acceleration. So as it increases, max acceleration occurs sooner. All right, I think that about does it. I tried to keep this as succinct and easy to understand as possible. I know it's not always super simple, so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, leave a comment, or any feedback. So thank you so much for watching, and maybe I'll do some more of these in the future, explaining different settings, or maybe talk about aim assist, how that works, rotational aim assist, magnetism, those type of things. But until then, you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.